I must say, when you came out with your note saying maybe the S&P goes down 10% if Democrats take both houses, a stir went around the Bloomberg newsroom as the headline came across. It got everybody's attention. Give us your thinking.
Well, our actual number was 6 to 10% decline. And we'd have to think that from our view on the market radar screen, so to speak, essentially the equity markets over the past few months since the election looked like they were looking for a Republican victory in at least one of the two contests that are occurring today. And that we believe that the market's impressive rally, it was almost every day was an uptick in the months since the election. We would have to think that enthusiasm that had come in might be shaken on the thought that taxes for corporations could rise significantly if President-elect Biden would remove the Tax Reform Act of 2018. That act increased the competitiveness of U.S. businesses on a global basis. And, you've got a lot of multinationals in the S&P 500. My recollection is about 40% of revenues comes from outside of the U.S. It also enabled corporations to keep more of what they earned after taxes. And we think that's an important consideration if you look and see that investments have been made in research and development over the course of that period since the Tax Reform Act of 2018. There was significant hiring up until COVID. And, of course, it supported dividends. We didn't see the number of dividends cut or eliminated anywhere near as the street was looking for once we got into the COVID crisis. So we'd have to say that's one of the risks. The other risk is that it doesn't matter whether we're talking to individual or private investors or institutions. Everybody is worried by the amount of debt that the U.S. has had to take on for the rescue from the great financial crisis and now the rescue process from the COVID crisis, and that's still added. Expectations of a Senate loss for the Republicans here would be that the Democrats would have an easier road to increase spending and to increase that deficit. So bad for corporations in terms of the tax stance. And then in terms of spending, it's how much more can you spend? How much more can people pay in taxes? We think the market could be upset.
Yeah, John, I have to agree with David. I thought it was so fascinating. And as a political scientist, I was almost screaming in my head because I trust when you say the markets think that if the Democrats take the Senate by this narrow margin, that the Biden administration could come in and go on, something of a mini wild spending and taxation sort of binge. But do you really believe that with this narrow margin that the Biden administration would be able to accomplish those things in the end? Historically, we see in the modern era, presidents get about one shot at a big bill. They do it, and in this case, it'll likely be some kind of stimulus. And after that, very difficult to get things done in our system, even when it's controlled by one party. And in this case, it's such a narrow margin we're potentially looking at. So do you think that the markets are sort of being scared unnecessarily so by this prospect?
Well, I think that's the important thing. I was going to say from the beginning of your question, it's not so much what I'm thinking, it's so much what the market itself appears to be thinking. And we would have to think that the market's opinion has been leading up to this pretty much that it would empower the Democrats based on President-elect Biden's remarks that he made during the process of the election and thereafterward. He expects a lot of action from day one, and a lot of the enthusiasm that we have seen. And it's not, we don't necessarily think it's irrational enthusiasm, but we think that on fundamentals of getting out of COVID will be very positive for the economy, regardless of what happens. But we think near term. Now, we must say this: while we think the market could decline near term, the counter to this would be, what would the programs be that the Biden administration would propose, and what would be the impact for the economy? Because ultimately, the economy is what really counts for the markets. There are people who will disagree with you on that or disagree with me on that, but the economy essentially feeds revenues and earnings for corporations. Right. And grows jobs and helps the consumer and businesses. It's an all-around kind of thing. Yeah. So when we look at this, we think there's another chapter. But the immediate reaction coming into this, and we saw yesterday, it was all of a sudden, it looked like the market suddenly thought that, well, maybe this isn't going to be as smooth a state election as expected.